Coming to you live from the Built Ford Tough Studio. Boomer Esiason, Greg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan, simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network and wherever you are in the free Odyssey app. Good Tuesday morning. Boomer out in Vegas for about a day and a half, a speaking engagement that I'm sure is lucrative. And he will be back here, I think, at some point tomorrow with a red eye. I don't know. It's hard to keep track of the man. But he is out in Vegas right now, and I know that he is fired up about the Knicks, and that means that Jerry is in here this morning. What's up, Jerry?
Gee, what is up other than your Knickerbockers?
Yeah, pretty good last night. Yeah. The fact that they won the game, but they had no business winning that basketball game.
Maybe.
I will admit it. I was confident going into the series. I'm still confident, even actually probably more confident because they played a game in which they didn't deserve to win and still found a way to win that game. But they were confused defensively. I thought they had a big problem dealing with the pick and roll. I thought that they got bailed out multiple times by the officials. There was too many calls on both sides. There was really not a lot of flow for teams that were playing up and down. There wasn't a lot of flow because of all the whistles. I thought that they got suckered into the pace of the Pacers, no pun intended, but they've got the best player in the series in Jalen Brunson when the fourth quarter was not going to lose, and his two teammates from Villanova were right there flanking him to make sure that wasn't going to happen with the Garden crowd and everything else. So it really could have been the most impressive win that they had because they didn't have it last night. They really did not. There were multiple times I thought the Pacers were going to leave the Knicks in their dust, and they kept coming back, and Jalen Brunson did what he did, another 40-point game. He's now the first guy in the history of the postseason to have the 4 40-point games in a row, also with 5 assists, which is nuts. But this game scared me. And I do believe, and it's lucky that they got out of there with a win last night because I think you're going to see major adjustments from Tibbs going forward because they can't play the same game that they did last night and expect to win this series.
Yeah, it's interesting because I took it in a different way. I thought the way they played in the first quarter, specifically defensively, disrupted Indiana several different ways. Indiana was dying to just shoot threes, and the Knicks weren't going to let them do it, and they were up on every man defensively. I mean, there were sets in the first quarter of this game that Indiana looked visibly frustrated that they couldn't shake free, and I thought they made the adjustment with the pick and roll, and then all of a sudden things started to open up for them. So I do agree the Knicks are going to have to adjust back now for whatever happens going forward. But I think really good teams do really good things, make big shots, and, get some breaks along the way. There's no question about it. The kickball, terrible call. And I think they even admitted that once again, with these post-game reports, They admit that was a mistake. The offensive foul is an offensive foul. That is a moving pick. He is not set. You want to tell me that you don't call it in that spot? That's fine. I won't argue with you. And I'm the first one to get on officials. But he is clearly not set.
You're right. By the book, that is totally right. But let's just talk for a minute. I'm trying to be fair here.
Sure.
Because if that happened to the Knicks, I would be furious. So think about that the play where Tyrese Maxey in Game 2 twice was getting tugged at and no calls were made. And the Knicks came back with that crazy.
I agree.
So that was a late in the game, let them play situation.
Different game.
But then in this game, there were too many whistles. So
I agree.
They did set the standard. They were going to call everything for the entire game.
It was also incredibly physical.
Right. You could say that there was consistency there, but I just thought in that situation that it was like, man, and even I saw Brian Windhorst talk about it this morning when I was in my office. He's like, I've watched a lot of basketball. I have never in a playoff game in the fourth quarter seen them call that.
My point is not that they should have or should not have called it. My point is if you're going to say they got away with one, the kickball, they got away with one.
Yeah, sure.
This, to me, by the book, is a foul. I would not have called it. I'll be very clear about that. I want them to play. I think it was Miles Turner that said you want the players deciding these games. I agree with him 100%. But it's not like they had to come out and say, our bad wasn't an offensive foul. It really was. It was an offensive foul. The Knicks, I don't want to say got lucky. They didn't get lucky.
Well, I mean, DiVincenzo sold it, too. I mean,
yes.
That's part of it.
Well, DiVincenzo looked like he got run over by a Mack truck.
Right, and then Jalen Brunson's been great at that as well, selling these these charges. So, I mean, I just...
But this is my point. You had the kickball. They got away with one. That's fine. The offensive foul to me is an offensive foul. Didn't have to call it. They did. And the challenge by Tibbs on the ball had a bounds. If he doesn't challenge that or doesn't have a challenge, and that's Indiana's ball, that's a 1-point game with 20 seconds to go.
Right. That
went their way, sure, but only because the officials made the mistake and they had the challenge in their pocket.
And I also thought, just to be fair, with the first glance, I mean, there was a lot of negative Knicks things last night, in my opinion. You know, that Tibbs challenge with Jalen Brunson and the foul that they overturned shocked the hell out of me.
I agree.
So there was a bunch of breaks in this game that I could have seen go the other way, that if I were an opposing fan, either of the Sixers or the Pacers, I would be saying, man, I guess maybe the NBA does want the Knicks to move on to the conference finals and take on the Boston Celtics, because this is nuts. Now, going forward, I don't think you're going to see a lot of the same stuff, because Rick Carlisle is a great coach. We know that. He's been around forever. But seeing what they saw last night, I am fully confident that Tibbs is going to find a way to make sure that the Indiana Pacers don't get as many easy baskets as they did in the second half of this game. And I know that they've been a top-scoring team, and it's easier said than done. But, and this is another part of this, Tyrese Halliburton, one of their best players, did nothing.
Only took 6 shots.
Nothing last night. So you can't expect that to happen. But I think Siakam, once he got into the paint, it was way too easy for him to score.
This McConnell kid was tremendous.
TJ McConnell's always been a pain in the ass for the Knicks. He's just one of those guys that has always been playing at his best, and he had a great Game 6 against the Bucks as well. So, yeah, I just thought it was too easy for them. And you're right. In the beginning of the game, when you're seeing blocks and steals and defense and smothering, I'm thinking, this is exactly what I was saying on the show, that the Indiana Pacers didn't experience this that much at all in the regular season, certainly didn't experience it in the Bucks series, and the Knicks are just going to clamp down on this team, and it's going to get ugly. That's what I thought was going to happen. But, man, I mean, there was a point there, where the Knicks are down 9 in the second half. It was,
fourth quarter,
about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And I thought it was over at that point. I got to be honest with you. All the faith that I've had in the team was gone at that moment with the way the game had gone. And then really what it was is once again, I mean, it was Jalen Brunson. Now we talk about the ball moving and how great he is at facilitating, and he did, and he had that assist to DiVincenzo, but I mean, that was really all on DiVincenzo. That was a three from, I mean,
what he does.
I mean, that was a deep three.
Yep.
So, but Jalen Brunson in a lot of these moments, going to the basket, getting the foul calls when the Pacers were in,
and
the penalty,
his free throws,
making every free throw, making every jump shot.
He was about 14 of 14 from the line, and some, I mean, clutch free throws in the final minute.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I don't want him to have to save the day like that every time.
Well, but Dante DiVincenzo also saved the day, too, by hitting a three-pointer from 5 feet behind the line.
He did. But, I mean, that fourth quarter was on the back of Jalen Brunson, which is great. And he's been awesome. But it was almost – I just –
But you know what? If it's not for Josh Hart for the first 3 quarters, if it's not for DiVincenzo – OG Anunoby hit big shots. I know it is what it is, a half-court shot, not that it mattered because Indiana did again build the lead back up, but the Knicks are about to go into the half down 7, and I thought they played actually a pretty good first half, and then Hartenstein hits that three-pointer from right around midcourt, and you think, hey, a little bit of momentum. They made plays last night, and that might be one of them too, and I do believe that to beat the Pacers are going to score. We talked about this the other day. The question is, do they score less than 120, or do they put up 140? If they're putting up 140, you're losing.
Yeah, there's no way.
You hold them in the 100s, the 1-teens, I think the Knicks win because I think defensively what they will do will be enough, and they will find the offense.
Yeah, and this was it felt like the Knicks were stunned at times in this game with the offensive aptitude of the Pacers.
And
I didn't like that at all.
I thought that both ways. I thought the Pacers were stunned that the Knicks kept coming back, and I felt like the Knicks were stunned that every time you look up, my God, they're still winning.
Right, and what it's going to come down to, and by the way, there was, especially when the Pacers started to come back and then had the lead they were rebounding better than the Knicks.
And much better than what the Knicks saw in the Sixers series. Much better.
But that was supposed to be a huge advantage for the Knicks in this series, and it was not. So, yes, I do think that the Pacers were like, oh, my God, like we've played so well. We should be winning by 15 at this point. How the hell are we not being able to kill this team?
But what happened in the final couple of minutes when the Knicks desperately needed an offensive rebound? There was Josh Hart, a big offensive rebound. Yes, and also had the putback.
Yep.
Also had the offensive rebound and put it back up and in.
Too. Yeah.
I mean, so you're right. And even Brian Anderson and Stan Van Gundy many times throughout the course of the broadcast were talking about how, wow, the Knicks only have 2 offensive rebounds. And if you go back to how they just murdered the Sixers on the boards in the last series, it was surprising. But when they needed to make plays, they made plays. And that's what great teams do.
Yeah, and it felt like Boomer's boy Precious Achiuwa did come into the game, didn't have much of an impact, but he was in there. I do think that you need to use more of the bench, and what drove me crazy was that bench point stat that they kept putting up
silly.
On TNT. These are 2 completely different teams.
Mm-hmm.
The Pacers, the guys who come off the bench sometimes play more minutes than the starters anyway. It's just a silly stat.
Right.
But the bigger point is the fact that the Pacers, with the way that they play, and there's more fresh bodies and more of a rotation, it could catch up to them with the pace of play that you had last night.
It might, and I know a lot of people have been on this. I look at the Knicks as probably the best conditioned team in the NBA because this is the way they have played all season long. You want to tell me they're going to get burnt out in the next series, the series after that? I suppose. But if your adrenaline doesn't take over as you're making deeper runs in the postseason, I don't know when it would. I do not get concerned about the minutes like everybody else. Has Josh Hart lost half a step?
No, and it's not so much of that as it is over the course of this particular series. Like in any one game, I don't feel that it's that way, but I haven't felt it yet. But I just was thinking last night, if it continues, because they were playing at the Pacers' pace. I didn't like that at all. The Pacers were playing their game, and the Knicks were catching up to them, and they did finally catch them and get by them because they just know how to win.
But what does that go to show you? The Pacers played their game and lost.
Well, that's why I said I think this, even with all the things that I brought up that were concerning, that it could be the Knicks' most impressive win because the Pacers were better. And I do have to admit there were several times, though, that I felt like the Knicks got bailed out. Several times. So that's not going to happen maybe it does happen every game because finally I'm rooting for a team that the NBA wants to see do well.
Perhaps.
It kind of feels that way, that there might be a little bit of a slant towards the Knicks when it comes to the officiating, so whatever help you can get. But the fact that they got through this, now, because of what happened last night, does not change my confidence in the series. It actually gives me a little bit more confidence because I do think that they are going to make the adjustments. But I was last night. I was like, oh boy, this is not the way I expected this to go.
I mean, theoretically, things are supposed to get harder each step of the way. So,
I love this matchup for the Knicks, and I thought that the Sixers were better. They had more stars, the Sixers, and I loved this matchup on paper for them.
Yeah, I think the fact that Embiid wasn't 100% makes it different. I think this is the better team right now. I do. I think Indiana. We talked about this the other day. This is a team that can light it up for 150 on any given night, and they did it, I think, 6 times this year. So we know that if they hit threes, they're going to score a lot. There's no question about that. The question for me is, can the Knicks disrupt them enough, like they did last night, to keep them down early? I mean, you were looking at the first quarter. I forget what exactly it turned out to be, but I think with 3 minutes to go in the first quarter, the Pacers had 17 points. That's not a Pacers quarter. Now, they wound up with, I think, tied at 27 maybe because they got into a little flurry there late in the first quarter. But I just think we're going to find out over the course of this series, which I don't think goes more than 6 games, to be quite honest with you. I think the Knicks win this thing in 6. You're going to find out if defense travels and if defense is more important in this day's NBA. Clearly in the 90s, it was all about defense. Basketball in the 2020s is all about the three-point shot and offense. Are the Knicks good enough defensively to disrupt them just enough to where they take 4 out of 5, 6, or 7?
Yeah, I still think the Knicks win in 5. I think it's sort of a similar situation that you had in the Sixers series, but I do think in the Game 5 back at the Garden, they end up winning the game. And if you're a Pacers fan, you're like, man, we let one get away. We could have come in there to the Garden, stolen game one, gotten home court advantage essentially back into our favor. I mean, Obi Toppin with the between-the-legs dunk and then a big three in the fourth quarter.
Not only him, did you see the Naismith dunk?
Oh, my God, I know. That was...
I mean, these guys, the Toppin one is ballsy, too.
I know, to do that, especially at the Garden, because he did that and missed in the Milwaukee series.
That's a close game.
Did the same exact thing.
And he got it to go, and it was pretty impressive, and it was a highlight reel dunk, but geez.
Yeah, I mean, he's feeling himself and screaming and the whole deal, and I was not in a good mental place last night watching this game. I really was not.
At the end of the day, this felt very much like the Sixers game that you thought Philly played their best game or gave them their best shot, and it wasn't good enough. I'm not saying that was Indiana's best shot, but it was pretty damn close, and it still wasn't good enough. Very, very different, yet very similar.
Yeah, and this is where I'm hoping and that we're not going to have a scare like this again. They're going to drop one game. I got to give the Pacers respect there. They'll drop at least one game, the Knicks. But I think in there, I don't think it's going to have to take a Herculean effort in the fourth quarter every single time to beat this Indiana Pacers team. And you saw the adjustments that were made after the first two games in the Sixers series to get Jalen Brunson to the point where he has now had these 40-point games in a row. They're going to have to do that, and they're going to have to do it at the defensive end, and Tibbs is the best in the business when it comes to that stuff, and we'll see the chess match with Carlisle and Tom Thibodeau back and forth, and for those that, the J.J. Redicks of the world who are like X's and O's basketball freaks, will be into that part of it, but it'll be interesting.
Well, I'll give you an X and O before we go to break. Why do they hit that? Why does that three for DiVincenzo, why is it there? If you watch the replay, and there was a great overhead replay, too, of it, the defender didn't know what to do. Do you double Brunson? Do you stay on DiVincenzo? Once Brunson makes his move, he sprints to him because Brunson's not a ball hog, finds the open DiVincenzo. Now, a guy came out and defended him, but he was far enough back and had enough space. It's about as open a look as you're going to get with a guy in the vicinity.
All right, Boomer and Gio with Jerry in for Boomer this morning, talking about a crazy Knicks win last night, Game 1 against the Pacers. CeeLo will join us to play some highlights.